Hi, and welcome back to another video. And today we'll be taking a look at a lot of 2028 polls. Now, I know 2028 is a long way away, but there have been a lot of recent polls that have been dropped lately, and I think they are worth looking into because there's a lot of things that have been also happening in American politics that really show, how voters are feeling with these polls. Now, these are obviously going to be the Democratic primary polls for 2028. Because in my personal opinion, as of right now, I think that the Republican primary, despite Trump floating the idea that he's going to do a third term, which I highly doubt is ever going, there's probably no chance it's happening. And I think that as of right now, and the polls are showing this, that J.D. Vance, the vice president, the current vice president of the United States, is the front runner and most likely is the favorite to have the nomination. And that's been showing a lot in the polls where he gets like 50%. Of course, if you put Trump in there, then Vance drops down to 19%. But most of the polls just have like Vance and a couple other Republican politicians, and Vance leads every time. So I think that as of right now, J.D. Vance is definitely the favorite for the nomination on the Republican side. Now, on the Democratic side, it's much more unclear. You have a lot of Democratic politicians that want to run for the nomination. There is no front runner as of right now for the nomination. There was, but it seems to be that is slipping, and there's a lot of now uncertainty on who Democratic voters want to possibly face J.D. Vance in 2028. Now, I'm only talking about this is because these polls will change dramatically and very, very quickly as time goes on here. And I think it's going to be interesting when we look back in some of these videos and say, okay, the polls were here and now they're here. So I think that's going to be very interesting, and it's why I think it is good, to track the polls as early as they are. So we can see, wow, in 2025, look at where they are now compared to like 2028. So I think this will be very interesting. But we are going to be talking a lot about Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris is the former vice president of the United States, who was vice president to 2021, 2025. She's no longer vice president after losing the 2024 presidential election to now President Donald Trump. And so it has been very uncertain on what Harris will do and what she will go for. The way I see it is Harris has, as of right now, two options. She could either run for president in 2028, or she could run for governor, California governor of 2026, which is coming up much sooner than the presidential one, obviously. But as you can see right here, there was actually a poll done earlier today for the California governor open primary. So it's not a Democratic primary, it's not a Republican primary. It's an actual open primary that has both Democrats and Republicans in it. And obviously, most of the Democrats are leading because California is a very safe state for Democrats. But you can see Harris leads this field by 23 points. 23 points. Now, I believe this is the only poll they've done so far. Yep, it's the only poll they've done so far. So as of right now, Harris leads by 23 points. 23 points. Now you have some other people who you may know, who's the former Senator Porter, who took in the seat. She was appointed by Governor Newsom after the death of, what's her name? There was one California senator who passed away, and Porter filled her seat. She was very old. She passed away of old age, and she filled the seat until the end of the term. And so she's kind of a former senator, and she's really not that known. But she is, I believe she's running for mayor of Oakland, I think. She's running for mayor of Oakland. And I think that she's probably going to lose it. So if she loses that race, she could always run for governor. And she already has the, I was a United States Senator, behind her, as Kamala Harris does. Harris has a whole bunch of stuff, which is why I do believe Harris, as of right now, in this race, would have the advantage. And the numbers do say, show that Harris has the advantage of 23 points. But looking at this race with all the other candidates, you have Kamala Harris, former vice president of the United States, and who was also the Democratic nominee in 2024. Has the clear advantage. She's the frontrunner as of right now. You have Porter, who's a former United States senator. You're a Republican, probably not going to win. And you have a bunch of no-names who probably aren't going to win. So it'd be really interesting if this race came down Kamala Harris, the former Vice President of the United States, and Porter, a former California Democratic United States Senator. Also, Harris and Porter are also both former United States senators, so it's gonna be really interesting to see how these goes. Now, as you can see here, these governor races, no matter who the nominee is, they've gone very, very Democrat in recent years. However, 2018 was a blue wave year where Democrats performed very well, and 2022, which was meant to be a red wave year, turned out to be more of a purplish year. And I even though the election year went well for Democrats, it also went pretty well for Republicans, but it could have gone better. It could have gone better. And you see Newsom here kind of performing only 3 points, worse, but still he, kind of wins around 59%. And, there's a 3 point shift to the right, but still, that's a small margin. That's a small shift. And this was a year where Democrats were supposed to do very poorly, and there were some spots in this, or there were some states in the election cycle where Democrats did poorly, like in the New York governor race, and the New York House races, and the California House races. And despite Newsom winning by a very big margin, kind of like he did 4 years ago, California House Democrats performed very, very poorly. And it's one of the reasons why at the start of 2023, Kevin McCarthy, starting out as Speaker, had kind of a big majority. Not as, a big majority as he'd liked, but it had a big majority, a much larger majority than compared to now, where Republicans only hold like a three-seat majority against the Democrat. I believe Newsom had like a five, or not Newsom, Jesus. Kevin McCarthy had like a 5 to 6 before he was removed as Speaker. I can't remember, but anyways, yeah, California, there it goes, very, very big for Democrats. And so if you're Kamala Harris, you win the nomination, you're easily going to be elected as governor. But the question is she able to survive this, this primary? Is she able to survive it? And I think that as of right now, she could, but we have to see a lot more polls, to be sure. Yeah, we only have Emerson College here, and Emerson College is a very good pollster, so I think this poll is probably very accurate. Now, I am not here to make this video mainly on the California governor primary, but this poll was very interesting, and we will obviously be checking in later, but there is something very interesting happening in the 2028 Democratic primary field. So, as I've mentioned before, since the day Kamala Harris lost the election to Donald Trump, since November 6, 2024, Kamala Harris has led the 2028 Democratic primary field bigly. However, in more recent weeks, her lead has been declining, as a lot more Democrats are getting much more, frustrated and angry with the lack of, work Democrats are trying to do to oppose Trump. They've been very frustrated, very annoyed. And very demanding that Democrats do more. We also have, we have people like David Hogg, who is the vice chair of the DNC, who is now attempting to primary very old Democrats who just sit in Congress and don't do anything. Which I think if you're demanding for party reform, that's great. Is he able to do it? We'll have to see. But stuff like that really shows that there is a shift within the Democratic Party where not just the voters, but the people at top in leadership is demanding for change. And I think what we're seeing here is, sure, there's a change shift in the leadership, but also with the voters. They are demanding something being done. And people like Kamala Harris, who, really hasn't been doing anything, she's just, her name's just being floated as of right now. She is declining in this primary because she isn't doing anything. And people like Cory Booker, people like AOC, who actually are doing things, are gaining momentum in these primary polls. Now, as of right now, this doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter at all. But it is worth, noticing that this shift is happening, and it is happening very, very quickly. Now this article and the poll, I believe, was done yesterday, which caught my attention, and I just had to make a video on it. So let's see if I can find the numbers here. Here we go. In a hypothetical Democratic primary for president, including the 2024 nominee, Kamala Harris leads just 18% of the vote, followed by former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg with 14% of the vote, and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 12%, and Senator Cory Booker at 12%. Now, I mentioned before that Kamala Harris months ago was leading by like 20 to 25 to even 30% in this primary field because she was the nominee, and Democrats felt very bad because she lost. And there's a lot of Democrats out there that still want to run Kamala Harris again. But I think that that movement in the Democratic Party is starting to fade, where they say, we only want Democrats that are actually doing something, to combat Donald Trump. And if Kamala Harris only pokes her head out once and makes one speech and then just disappears again, that's not enough for voters to say, yeah, we want Kamala Harris to run again. I think that the most likely outcome is that Kamala Harris will probably come back in 2026 and run for governor, or even announce her campaign in late of this year. So that'll be very interesting, and obviously when that happens, I'll make a video on it. But like I said, there's this movement within the Democratic Party where they seem to be, unsatisfied with any Democrat politician that isn't doing enough to combat the Trump administration, to go after Republicans, and we are really starting to see that. Josh Shapiro, 6%. Sure, he doesn't do much, but his house was recently set on fire, and he's getting a lot of media attention right now. Tim Walz, who is, out there talking about Social Security, making fun of Elon Musk, and doing all these other things, he's now at 7%. Gavin Newsom, who's been doing this podcast, and he actually has been gotten criticism, but as of just yesterday, he is suing the Trump administration for tariffs. And so he's going to be going against legal battles with the Trump administration, so now he is in the single digits. AOC, really, I think that, it's kind of self-explanatory, where AOC has been doing all these rallies with Bernie Sanders. She's been trying to fight the oligarchy, going after Elon Musk and everything else, and that's why she has this wide support. Cory Booker has also the same with AOC, because Cory Booker did a 25-hour, speech in the Senate, and Democrats were very inspired with what he did, what he said, what was in the speech, and how long he was able to do it for. However, I do believe Cory Booker will probably drop back down, towards the rest of this field that are like, 2 to 3%, because, obviously the news of his speech will eventually fade, and I don't think he's going to be doing much more. But if he does, that's great. Now, Pete Buttigieg, very interesting. I wasn't expecting to see him at the top of this list, but I guess that's what you get when you take away, the frontrunner, which is Kamala Harris, which, she may be fading, but, she still is kind of the favorite here. And if you take her away, somebody like Pete Buttigieg, who was in the Biden administration, kind of comes up top here at 17%. Leading just Cory Booker and AOC by 3%. Now, that isn't much, but he's still the number one if you take away Kamala Harris. Now, we still have some, some other Democrats who are less known because they don't really get much media attention, except for maybe Jasmine Crockett. But Chris Murphy, Wes Moore, Raphael Warnock, Stephen A. Smith, Sean Fain. I don't even know who Sean Fain is. And, of course, we have Don't Know at 9%, which, if you look at it, that's more than Mark Cuban, Andy Beshear, Jon Stewart, Amy Klobuchar, J.B. Pritchard, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, Tim Walz, and all of the rest. And obviously Gavin Newsom, AOC, Cory Booker, and Pete Buttigieg are over that. But still, 9% is quite a lot when you look at the numbers in this poll. So I think that without Kamala Harris, obviously it is very undecided. Very undecided. And most of the people who lead this poll, like Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, AOC, Gavin Newsom, Tim Walz, are people who get in the media attention a lot. Like, get a lot of attention from the mainstream media. They do interviews. I know Tim Walz does a lot of interviews. AOC does a lot of interviews. I don't say a bit same about Whitmer. But yeah, there's still a lot of uncertainty in this poll, and it'll be very interesting to see where this all develops. However, like I mentioned before, Cory Booker has moved up in the presidential primary poll, which I predict will probably fade. I don't think that Cory Booker is going to be a serious consideration for the nominee in 2028. I believe that he'll probably fade. He really doesn't do much other than his speech he gave, which, inspired a lot of Democrats. But I don't think that it's going to be enough for, voters to remember in like 2 to 3 years from now. So following Senator Cory Booker's record-breaking 25-hour-long speech on the floor of the Senate, the New Jersey Democrats shot up in popularity in a recent poll asking about the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. A recent poll asked likely Democratic voters who they would vote for in the 2028 Democratic primary if held today. Booker was backed by 11% of respondents, placing him in second behind former Vice President Kamala Harris, who had 28%. So yeah, if you do take away Kamala Harris's like big lead, it is very uncertain on who voters want as the Democratic nominee. They see a name, they put a check, and they're not sure. The base of the Democratic Party is unsure. They are completely divided between people like Tim Walz or Josh Shapiro, or Gretchen Whitmer or AOC or all these people. They just don't have one candidate where all of them can unite behind, that they want to support. And Kamala Harris is one of those people. There's a huge majority in the Democratic, well, not a huge majority in the Democratic Party, but a majority in the Democratic Party that are going to back Kamala Harris for now because she was the nominee in 2024. And there's a lot of sympathy for her because she lost. And she's the former vice president, and she still gets her name, thrown up in the headlines. And she gets media attention without her, even trying, because she's the former vice president of the United States and she was in the Biden administration. And I assume because Joe Biden, peaked his head back up, Kamala Harris will probably once again, get more media attention, as she really is, she's being very quiet. She popped up one time, and since then she has kind of disappeared. But we will see, we will see. So this poll indicated a hypothetical head-to-head matchup between Harris and Booker. The former vice president was backed by 54% of the respondents, while 34% backed Booker. So like I said before, right, there's the this huge, well, not huge, well, the majority of the Democratic base, right, backs Harris because they have a lot of sympathy for her for losing to Trump. You take that away, and the base has really no idea on who to back. They all want different people, and they all don't exactly have, a clear choice. They're all not united behind one person. Each portion of the base wants to, support one or each several candidates. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see, how this goes, what happens, who runs, who says, no, I'm not running. So yeah, it will be very, very interesting. There are around 20 other Democratic figures also listed in the poll who also received single digits. Those who polled over 3% were Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 7%, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, 5%, and California Governor Gavin Newsom, 4%. On the Republican side, the poll showed Vice President J.D. Vance leading about 47% of Republican respondents backing him. So yeah, like I said, J.D. Vance is the clear, nominee choice. And I think that 2 to 3 years from now, J.D. Vance will probably be the Republican nominee, but still, very uncertain on who the Democratic nominee is. I highly doubt it's going to be Cory Booker, and I also highly doubt it's going to be Kamala Harris. It is going to probably be somebody who we probably don't expect, like who is not in the the mainstream media. There's a lot of Democrats that are hoping to gain enough media attention to be a very good choice for 2028. And I do not believe that any of the really popular options right now will be the nominee. There's a lot of governors right now that will soon be term limited by 2028 will come by. Andy Beshear of Kentucky, very popular. Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania probably will still be governor. Brian Kemp, he is Republican. He's also be considered for president and Senate. He will be term limited. There's a whole bunch of governors. Newsom will be, term limited. Whitmer will be term limited. Tim Walz won't be, so that'll be very interesting. But there's a lot of Democratic governors that are, that are viewed very popular within the Democratic Party who will most likely no longer be governor by the time this, this primary really is, in effect. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see where it all goes. And we also have this California poll, which, I showed you guys earlier, which is the California governor, or the California governor primary poll, where 50% of the voters think she should not run. Now, I have told you guys that I believe that Kamala Harris will most likely run in the governor poll. But, this is the poll I showed you guys earlier. Kamala Harris is 31%. Katie Porter is 8%. 39% are undecided. 3% say somebody else. So if you ignore all the other candidates, including Harris and Porter, and you take the undecided, and then you take the someone else that is about 42%. to like Kamala Harris's 31%. So 42%, well, 39% say undecided, and then 3% say someone else. If you put those together, that's 42%, where they're not well, they're not backing Kamala Harris or Katie Porter or any of the others of these Democratic or Republican candidates. So I think that's very telling, where most California voters are either undecided or they don't want any of these candidates. But as of right now, I think Kamala Harris is a clear favorite. But still, very early, very early, very early. And yeah, we will definitely be seeing where this goes, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. And I obviously will be making more videos as it develops, but I have a lot of videos to make on Canadian politics. I'll be definitely dropping another video today, if I get to it. But anyways, that is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.